Hey guys, and welcome to a new interview with Cullen Bunn for Shadowman issue 1. Really happy to have Cullen with us to talk about this book. And of course, if you guys have any questions about the book and anything else, we'll dive in. But first off, who's Shadowman? What's this book about, Cullen?
So Shadowman is a character. He's been in the Valiant universe since the beginning. He is he's sort of their horror hero. He is this character. The world of the Valiant universe, the supernatural side, is kind of defined by our world and this other world called the dead side. And and sometimes the dead side's full of all sorts of awfulness, really, and sometimes it bleeds through into our world. And Shadowman is sort of the guy who stands as the guardian between our world and the dead side. So he's always on that edge between these two worlds, defending us.
And, Shadowman has existed before. This is Valiant, so everyone has their own spin on different characters. So how do you try to keep what has been done before with Shadowman and also do your own thing?
Well, I definitely wanted to honor the stories that have come before. So this isn't a reboot or anything like that. The previous arc of the previous storyline in Shadowman kind of left us in an interesting place, because Shadowman is bound to this Lola, which is a spirit, and that's what the Shadow Lola that gives him all of his abilities. And he's always been sort of a contentious relationship. At the end of the previous Shadowman run, though, that relationship kind of changed, and Shadowman and this Lola became more bound together, and they're working in unison. And it kind of so I took this as the opportunity to redefine Shadowman's powers. He's more powerful than he was before. He's kind of got a new lease on life. But then I wanted to take it in a new direction in terms of the storyline and the tone. So this is a different tone than what we've seen before in Shadowman. It's a little darker. It's a little more definitely leans heavily into the horror side of the character. And then there's other little things that we're doing differently that I think longtime fans it should be pretty exciting. Shadowman's kind of always been this New Orleans based character, and while his first story is based in New Orleans in the first issue, he quickly starts sort of this world, this globe hopping adventure. And we start seeing him in different places and interacting with different types of characters, and going on adventures that we might not have seen before.
And how do you feel like this setting changes his narrative, or do you feel like it changes at all besides the people he interacts with?
Yeah, I think the setting, the different settings, all of the, every time we change settings, I think you're going to see a different facet of Shadowman and a different facet of the supernatural side of the Valiant universe. Each story in this series, even though there is an overarching story, each story in this book is pretty much a standalone issue. So you could, the way I'm trying to handle it is, you could pick up any issue of Shadowman and understand who that character is, even if you've never read a Shadowman book before, and you can understand where that story's going. I mean, now if you read all of them, you're going to get a bigger picture and get a better, a bigger story that's going to unfold. And there are little hints to that bigger story that are playing out in every one of these sort of standalone issues.
And is Shadowman an ongoing? Is it, something you see an ending with? I don't know if that's been announced or not.
Well, it's an ongoing series. So yeah, I've planned out the initial few arcs, and I can't help but think of bigger stories and future stories. But definitely we've got the first several arcs figured out and outlined, and we're working towards and that'll tell one story. But it also, at the end of that, it kind of blows things up again, and there's a bigger story, that will unfold from that, because I'm doing, one of the things that I'm doing in this, and I can't reveal too much about it, but Shadowman's he has sort of arch nemesis, an arch nemesis, but we're introducing a new big bad supervillain into the Valiant universe into the story, who I think will become Shadowman's the biggest villain he's ever faced before.
And I was gonna ask, now that this is an ongoing, and well, like Punk Mambo, that was a mini, right? That wasn't an ongoing.
It was not. Yeah, that was always always intended to be a 5-issue miniseries. We would love to do more, and even with Punk Mambo, I always saw it as sort of a series of miniseries if we could get to that point where we do more stories with that character. But yeah, this is a slightly different approach because it's an ongoing series.
And would you like to cross over with other Valiant characters, because you kind of have more of a chance because it's an ongoing?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think those conversations have already taken place. There are, I have some big ideas for what we could do with Shadowman and with Punk Mambo, and seeing those two interact, but also seeing bringing Shadowman into the bigger world and having him interact with some of the other mainstays.
Who would you like to see the most besides Punk Mambo?
I have thoughts of an Exo Man of War Shadowman story that would be kind of awesome, I think.
That'd be really awesome. That'd be cool. We do have some comments. We have the many Toms. There's a lot of Toms there, who says hello. And then the Black Knight, who says, hi, I'm a huge Valiant fan. Can't wait for Shadowman to continue.
Well, hello. Awesome. And I'm with you. I can't wait for it to continue either.
Yes, and I guess we should announce there is not a release date yet for Shadowman. So just wait for later in the year. And then I also recommend just looking at the Valiant social media, because I'm sure once they get that release date, it'll be there. And Cullen, I'm sure will announce it too.
Yeah, it was it had a release date. Things kind of shifted because of the world, but yeah, you'll see. You'll definitely be seeing, if you watch Valiant's social media, you watch my social media. As soon as we know, what that release date's going to be, we'll be shouting it from the rooftops.
And Black Knight says they really like the covers for the new Shadowman. Yeah, that artwork, man, for those books. Looks so good.
Yeah, so we've got that great Tony Moore, the main Tony Moore cover. But then I just love that they've done these horror movie tributes. So, and you can see if you can find them if you haven't seen them already. They've done great horror movie poster tributes for Shadowman that I think are going to be awesome. I love the cover that Jon Davis-Hunt did for the book, with Shadowman sitting in this sort of throne with all these I don't know, it has sort of a House of Mystery host vibe to it. He's sitting in this throne and all these creepy crawlies are kind of spilling out all around the edges, and it's an awesome image too.
And as an ongoing for this book, are you going to have the same artist for each arc, or is it just going to be different artists? What's going on with that?
So right now, the plan is it will be that Jon will be doing the series. Those things, obviously that stuff changes, and there's always the possibility for change. But yeah, Jon is the Shadowman artist.
We actually have some comments straight in the chat. We actually got some questions on social media as well, which will trickle in. But Don says, excited for the new Shadowman. Will we be seeing more Jaunty in the new series?
I think maybe that should be that'll be answered later down the road. There is one character that has been in previous Shadowman stories that is going to be in almost every issue. He's almost Shadowman's sidekick. It's a frenemy kind of relationship between the two, and I think he's appeared in some of the preview pages. But that's Baron Samedi will be showing up. He's been sort of an enemy to Shadowman and sort of a trickster figure, but he will be playing a big role in this series.
We do have the wonderful Greg Katzman in the comments who says, since you've been written both, and they're both badass for different reasons, Roku and Punk Mambu, who wins? Ooh.
No matter who wins, we all lose. No, that's look, I like both of those characters a great deal, but I don't see how Punk Mambo doesn't take that one. She's just she's just got too much grit, and I mean they both have a lot of stick-to-itiveness, but I think her magical gifts give her quite the edge in that battle.
And I know that Valiant's been doing those battles on social media. So if you haven't seen those, go check out Valiant social media. They're doing such a great job keeping all Valiant fans entertained. So we have TML who says, Cullen, so I understand that with the new arc, Jack is going on a monster tour of the world. Care to share a bit about your influences?
Sure. So there's actually a few things that I think I can point to as distinct influences for this approach to the series. When I first started thinking about doing the Shadowman series, one of the things that immediately popped into my head was the old Spectre books that DC used to put out. And in those books, we'd have stories that were like almost standalone horror stories. And then the Spectre would show up and have some role to play. And then he'd enter the story and he'd be out. And sometimes he was only in the story for a short while. And that was sort of my starting point for what I wanted to do with this book. And then I wanted to kind of embrace all the different sort of tones of horror. So we have, we have sort of this, we might have a really dark, grim story. And some of these stories, I mean, there was some really dark stuff going on in these stories, but also, I wanted to have the opportunity to play with action horror and comedy horror, and really do sort of a tour of different kinds of horror themes and styles. So a lot of different books, a lot of stories, a lot of movies, and just the genre itself became sort of a big influence on what I wanted to do here.
There's a lot of Toms in our comments. We appreciate all the Toms.
That's why one Tom has all the Toms. So he's the ultimate Tom, I guess. And then
definitely the ultimate Tom. But yeah, he asks lots of talks about monsters. I don't even know this monster. Will there be any Iowa too?
Lola.
I don't even.
Yeah, that's
okay.
That's Lola. And yeah, there will be. We have the Shadow Lola, which is going to be a big part of the story, in a way that the Shadow Lola has never been in Shadowman before. But yes, you're going to see other Loa spirits in the book. You're going to be again. I'm trying to not say too much. There's some interesting characters that have sort of a bone to pick with the Loa in general. So.
And we have another new commenter here from Misadventures 101. Since you mentioned New Orleans, is there any research you conducted for the series? Well, you did say that was like the first chapter. So I guess maybe the other places he goes to, did you have to do like a lot of setting researches?
Yeah, New Orleans, I've done a bunch of comics set in New Orleans. So I've done a lot of research on that city and visited the city several times. But for every setting that we see Shadowman in, I do. I like to say I do enough research to make myself dangerous. I don't make it so that I don't want that research to show. I want it to feel right to the reader, and as long as it feels right to the reader, I'm happy. But I'm like everybody else. I start researching some city or something, and I just kind of go down the rabbit hole. There's a chapter that involves American ghost towns, and I just ran down the rabbit hole of American ghost towns so quickly when I was doing that research.
Definitely like 3 a.m, and you're just like, how did I get down this rabbit hole?
Panel 1, and then I'm writing, and then I'm doing research for several hours.
Hey, it's all ideas for future books, I'm sure, as
That's right.
well. You do that research, not just for one story. But yeah, speaking of, well, maybe not research, but what was the pitching process like for Valiant, because you've worked with Valiant before. So for this book in particular, was it like Valiant saying, hey, think you would be great for Shadowman, or were you like, I need to work on Shadowman?
Yeah. So the editor on the book, Heather Antos, who I've worked with in the past many times, and she's always known that I wanted to write horror stories, and she's always, we've always talked about doing, a scary book together. So she reached out and asked if I'd like to pitch a Shadowman series, and of course I was all for it. He is probably the character that I thought was most suited to me as a writer in the Valiant universe. So I put a big pitch together, and I'm not going to say this line because it features so heavily in the themes of the book and the big surprises of the book. But I wrote one little sentence at the top of the pitch, right under it said Shadowman, and then I wrote this theme. And Heather says that is that's what sold Valiant on the concept. So hope, I think readers are going to really like it. I think I used that line in issue 3 of Shadowman. That line actually enters the story, and
we have a little while to wait.
Yeah, you have a little bit to wait. But that's where it, you'll really get that punch of what this is what this series is about, really.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to reading that line and saying, that's what Cullen was talking about.
Yeah, let's see. So there's your challenge. As you're reading the book, you can see which line was it that I had at the top of the pitch.
Are you going to reveal it on social media? So if we're wrong, okay, good.
Once the book comes out, then I'll say I put this. This was my, this was sort of the hook of the series.
All right, so definitely watch out for that, guys. Also, TML asks, is this have any Six Gun vibes, Cullen?
I could see some issues of it. Probably, definitely have a Six Gun vibe. Six Gun had a lot of supernatural elements, but it was a lot of action and fun, and there will be some of that action and fun here. Even though I say, this is a really dark book at times, Jack Shadowman is sort of an everyman character. He's not he's just like us. So I try to inject quite a bit of fun and some humor into it through his reactions to the things he's encountering.
I believe we already touched upon this, but if you want to go in further detail, Don asks, I've been trying to get more of my friends into Valiant. Would the new Shadowman series be good for someone who has never read it? You said yes, but is there a reasoning behind you feel like it's very new reader friendly?
Yeah, it's absolutely, you don't have to read any other Shadowman to get this book. I purposefully wanted every issue, I give you enough information that you should know who Shadowman is, what his goals are, what the story's about, and obviously I can't give you every, I don't give a full history of Shadowman in every issue, but I give you enough that you'll know who it is, and I try to do that every issue. And yeah, Shadowman is a book that I think readers will be able to hop on and just enjoy the ride.
Speaking of Heather, guess who's in the comments?
Uh-oh,
Heather's in the comments.
She's watching. See if I screw up. Don't tell her that I've revealed every big secret. So
I won't. She won't know at all.
Yeah.
But welcome, Heather, to the chat. We actually had a comment on one of my Facebook posts from Jorge, who said, when you were developing the story, what were some of the aspects that you considered the most challenging?
Well, a big challenge is what we just talked about. I wanted it to be very new reader friendly. So, and really trying to tell these sort of standalone stories, that can be tough. A one and done story can be really a big challenge. But I wanted to embrace that. Having, I'm very constrained by the number of pages in the story. Yeah, it's that's the big challenge. Making sure every story stood alone and making sure that readers could really enjoy that from the jump with every issue. And that's even, that's the additional challenges. I'm trying to tell a bigger story within those standalone stories.
And what made you decide to challenge yourself to do that? Why did you not just do all right, let's just do this arc and it all connects in the end?
Well, I think I thought it would set it apart from other Shadowman stories that we read. I thought it would set it apart from other books on the shelf. Um, and I think there's a beauty to those standalone stories. They're so accessible and they can, and done well, you know, knock on wood, they're just so much fun to read. You know, I've done it with some of my Marvel stuff. I did like a 5-issue run of Moon Knight, and that every issue was a standalone story. And it was challenging, but it was some of the most fun I had working on, you know, that character. So this was just being able to do that on a bigger scale.
Do you feel like you kind of embrace Silver Age comics in that regard? Because like way back when, you know, that's you had the one and done. Do you feel like you embrace that?
Maybe to some degree. I think the pacing, it's definitely, you know, the pacing is more in line with modern, you know, modern comic pacing rather than the Silver Age pacing. But yeah, to some degree, absolutely. And then, you know, and it's looking at like episodic TV, and it could be because I was rewatching Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel when I first started working on this. So I that kind of, you know, that feel was always there for me. I like those, you know, so many of those stories were episodic, but they were within a, you know, a bigger story.
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting example because Buffy and Angel were so good at, like, I mean, they pretty much invented the big bad, or at
Yeah,
least Buffy did, and
absolutely.
was able to tell that full arc of a story. But you're so right. I think that's something that's even missing in current television is that feel of like, all right, just watch that one episode, and that was that one special episode. It doesn't have
Yeah,
to do with like, oh, we have to watch the next episode, see what happens next. It
right.
was really like, again, like the musical episode or whatever. So that's really cool
Yeah.
to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely at least a script out there that says, "Do you remember Buffy and Angel when this happened?" And you know, so you know, I have had that those shows in mind when I was working on this too.
Were there any other influences? Because that was actually another question from Jorge, specifically from movies, television, comics.
Alan Moore Swamp Thing, I think, is I was doing a lot of reading of Swamp Thing. So a lot of times when I'm just getting started on for the day, I'll sit down with a book that usually something that I've read many times, and I'll just do a little rereading. I'll look through some things that I think are in the same tone or mood of what I'm working on. And I'd read a lot of the Alan Moore Swamp Thing issues while I was working on the especially the first arc of Shadowman.
We do have a couple more questions here from the chat. Eric says, will longtime Valiant fans see nods to previous continuity? So we know it's still the same character from previous runs.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, you know, I'm like I said earlier, I don't want to reboot the character or anything, and I want to honor the stories that have come before. So yes, you'll know this is Jack from previous runs, and so you don't have to worry about that at all.
Do you have any like specific nods that fans will see, or did you really just not want to do that?
Well, I always I always want to stick to what's come before, but you'll see a lot of it comes through his interactions with Baron Samedi. You'll see some of that there, but there's some things that I wanted to make sure I'm getting back to with Shadowman. You know, he's a musician, and I want to make sure that's obvious. But you're going to see little nods throughout the story for sure.
And how do you, one of my favorite topics of comics, or at least to see in comics, is how do you instill music in a static medium? It's just one of my favorite things. So as Shadowman being a musician, how do you instill that in your script, and how do you dictate the artist, or maybe the artist does it themselves, to show music?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because I toyed with it, in a lot of ways. There was early on when I was working, and I was like, maybe I can include, like little nods to songs, or I can mention songs to listen to while you're, reading Shadowman. I was like, it didn't fit with the vibe of the book. But I felt like I tried to do this with Punk Mambo too. I listened to a lot of certain types of music, and I tried to write to that pace, if it was a frenetic pace or more of a punk face, a punk theme, and I just wanted the mood to feel like that kind of story. So there are nods to, you'll see Shadowman talking about musicians or thinking about music from time to time, but we don't ever necessarily we don't put any musical, we don't say listen to this song, although I kind of want to put the Shadowman playlist together before the book comes out.
You totally should. That'd be really fun. That way they could listen to the music while they read issue 1.
Yeah. And I listen to a lot of different things because, there's jazz was important for me to listen to while I was writing Shadowman, but also, I listen to a lot of movie soundtracks and things like that. So yeah, maybe I'll start putting a little list together of some of the stuff I was listening to while writing this.
That's so interesting because there's some writers out there who's like, oh, I can't listen to anything, like whatever. And then, I mean, I'm the type of writer who's like, I have to listen to something or else I can't work. So yeah, do you feel like it helps listening to music and getting in the zone?
Yeah, it can definitely set a mood. Now, I have trouble listening to music with lyrics when I'm writing. I find it too distracting, which is why, soundtracks and sort of ambience music will really will be what I'm playing most of all. But sometimes I'll play some stuff with lyrics. But yeah, I'll also, though, there's lots of times where I just forget. Like if I really sit down and I get working and I get into the groove of writing, I might forget to put music on at all.
Hey, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
That means you're so much in the groove, you don't need it.
That's right.
We do have a comment here from Matt Keys. Yo, Cullen, Cold Spots was amazing, and I feel doesn't get enough love.
Thank you. Yeah, Cold Spots was a fun book. Just so if you like that book, Mark Torres, the artist from Cold Spots, and I, he just gave me the first issue of a new series that we're working on together, and we're taking it out. So keep your eyes open for that.
That's exciting. Thomas, this is a really good question. If the shadow knows what evil lurks in the heart of men, what does the shadow man know?
Well, he knows better than anybody that you don't mess with the dead side. And you're going to see that even in as soon as the first issue, you see people trying to toy with this other realm, this dead side, and it never pays off for people. And Shadowman, he should hold Zoom meetings to tell people to stop messing with the dead side. But it's an interesting phrasing of the question. I've been looking at it. I saw it pop up, and I was kind of looking at it there. And it's funny that yes, the shadow knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men. That evil in the hearts of men will play a role in this series and kind of what's going on in the world for Shadowman.
And also, we got a comment from Comic Shelf. This is on Twitter. Do you think that there's something about the horror genre that comics can express better than other mediums?
Yeah, I mean, so horror comics tread an interesting sort of middle ground because we've got prose, horror novels and horror short stories, and we've got movies, and somewhere in the middle is comics. And prose, so horror comics can get the visual aspects of horror down a little better than the prose novel, than prose. In that, if you really need to picture what's happening, and some of the stuff that Jon does in this book is just so grotesque and horrifying, you get to see that in vivid detail. But it also gives you an opportunity that movies don't give you, that you can really dig in to the character's thoughts. And there's even sort of there's in some cases there's almost this poetic and this sense of poetry that's going on in the comic that you can't get in a movie. So it gets to explore different facets of it. I love all those because I think horror prose there's some things you can do with a prose novel that you can't do in a comic, and things you can do in a movie that you can't do in the others. But comics has that interesting balancing act that it pulls off.
And what attracts you to horror so much in comics?
Well, I like those kind of stories anyway, and I think I always have. I used to, when I was a really little kid, I would have said I don't like scary things, but I always did. I was always fascinated by the stories of ghosts that live in the pond out behind our house, and I was always sneaking in to watch horror movies while my older brother and sister were watching them. And really, horror stories give us this opportunity to deal with just some awful things from the safety of, the safety of wherever we're reading them. And even though I think a lot of horror stories, are terrible, they have awful endings, and characters you love die and suffer horribly, the genre is kind of hopeful. And this is something I've always felt like. I like to see these characters, even though they might be in hopeless situations, there's no way out for them. They struggle and they fight, and they kick and claw their way through trying to survive. And there's something hopeful about that to me, that even in the face of these awful situations, that these characters are fighting and struggling to survive. And I've always found that very, honestly, a little inspiring.
Now, we all know you're the horror guy, but are there other genres? I mean, I don't even want to include superhero, because I feel like if you write comics, you have to say superhero, but are there other genres or subgenres that you really enjoy that maybe people don't know that you really enjoy?
Well, I think fantasy is a big one for me. The Six Gun, a lot of people think of it as a horror western, and I've always said it's a fantasy western. But high fantasy is big for me. I'm really interested in that genre, and I'm doing some stuff in that genre now. And I'm talking, the world of wizards and dragons, and really, digging into the fantasy, the epic fantasy aspects. So yeah, fantasy is a big one for me. So I like science fiction as well, but any science fiction I write tends to lean into the horror elements a little more.
Is there another genre in Shadowman besides horror, you feel?
Well, definitely a lot of action. There's an action element to it. Jack is he's an action-based character. He is not afraid to throw some punches and punch some monsters. And that's one of the things, we said superheroes earlier. I wanted to make sure, even though there are a lot of spooky elements to this book, it's a superhero book, and I want to make sure we get that aspect of it in there as well, that we see Shadowman being heroic.
And going back to actually, let's do another medium here. So Shadowman actually was announced that they're making a video game. They're making a remastered video game. I don't know if you're a video game fan, but in particular, what would you like to see with this as someone who's been writing Shadowman?
I don't play a lot of video games. I play some. I'm not very good at them anymore. I think I don't know that I have the patience, and I get very frustrated when I get stuck somewhere. But I played the old Shadowman video game when it came out way back when. I remember going to a friend's apartment and being amazed by the old game. The interesting thing about that game is how immersive it can be. Because some of the games I've played lately, it's just amazing that you get into it. And when something jumps at you, you feel like, oh no, it's really there, and you jump. So I think there's a great element of immersion that I would love to see in that. And aside from the horror elements, wouldn't it be awesome to incorporate some musical elements into that video game?
Of course.
All those, there are all these music-based video games. Let's see some music in the Shadowman game. That would be kind of awesome.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Even just like I don't know, they're sub games or something, and we could see some music.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, I think that just like any medium, I think video games have seen the power of music, and yeah, hopefully that's something that they notice with this remaster. TML asks, Cullen, are we going to see Jack using a scythe in your new series?
We will. He definitely keeps that weapon at hand.
Look forward to that then. And are there, going back, what attracted you to Shadowman? Why did you really want to write this character? He's a character that I just like
the darkness of it. I like this. I like the concept of the dead side and that world. I liked, I feel like I like that he's a superhero character, but he's also dealing with horror elements, and it's something that I've always felt like. I do a lot of horror in my creator-owned work, but a lot of publishers have never really, sort of tapped me to do these horror characters for them. So that's why I was excited. Shadowman, I feel like, is my first chance to play in a bigger world, a shared universe with their horror characters. I mean, Punk Mambo as well, but those, so I kind of throw those characters together. It's my opportunity to do those kinds of the stories I kind of wanted to do for other publishers for a while.
And speaking of Valiant, are there any other Valiant characters you'd really like to write? I know you mentioned Exo before for the crossover.
Yeah, I like a lot of them. I was just thinking the other day about, I was talking to the folks at Valiant the other day, and Ninjak is a character that I don't think I ever really appreciated until recently when I was reading up on different Valiant characters and reading some of the stories, and I was like, oh, I get what the character's about now. And Ninjak's a character I think could be cool, and it could be a lot of fun. Rai is another character that I think I could, I feel like I might be able to do something interesting with that character. But for sure, I'm in the right place with Shadowman and Punk for, absolutely. But it would be nice to do something where Shadowman interacts with all of these characters. So
for sure. I hope.
Is Heather still listening? Is Heather still watching?
Well, let's hope not. If you want to say something here, or let's hope so Heather can get us that crossover. Either way, whatever gets us the crossover. But yeah, Greg said Ninjak, of course. And then Cullen said, "Oh, what were you gonna say?" Yeah,
the video. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but Valiant released on YouTube the Ninjak versus the Valiant Universe web series. So you get to see this. I mean, it's pretty awesome to see some of these characters because Roku with the hair. She's in the very first episode. It's awesome. I think it's just on their YouTube, but I'm sure there's links on their social media.
Yeah, definitely check all those stuff out. I mean, Valiant in general, man, their social media game is so good, and just exploring those characters and letting people know about them is really great. But yeah, as we wrap up here, is there anything you'd really like to tell the fans about Shadowman that you hadn't, and again, why people should pick it up?
Yeah, I'm really excited for this book. I think it's gonna be unlike any book on the shelf when it comes out. It's going to be unlike any of the Shadowman stuff you've read before, but it's also, it's going to be a great, if you haven't read the character, you're going to be able to jump in and enjoy the character. If you have read the character, it continues his story and picks up where we left off. So I think there's, I think there's so much potential with this book, and it's going to tell so many different kinds of stories. I think some will be, some will be frightening, and some will be heartbreaking, and some will punch you in the stomach. And like I said, we're going to be introducing some new characters who I believe will influence Valiant from here on out.
That's awesome. And is there anything you'd like to plug? Obviously, Shadowman. And once again, release date is not out yet, but please, check out Valiant's social media, check out Cullen's social media for when that release date is re-announced, resolicited. Because again, it was, just for no confusion, it was solicited for May, I believe, right? Originally,
I think early June, maybe, or May. Yeah, I can't remember now. At this point, time has no meaning to me.
So, exactly.
So who knows? But yeah, it'll be later this year, and absolutely, if you follow Valiant, if you follow me on social media, and it's really easy to find me on Twitter. It's just at Cullen Bunn, and that's where I'm most active on social media. Anyway, it'll be very hard for you to miss when it's going to be on the shelves.
And are there any other books you'd like to plug besides Shadowman that's coming out for you?
Well, I am doing some other Valiant stuff, so I can't talk about it. So keep an eye out. If you're interested in the kind of the supernatural side of Valiant, Punk Mambo's out in trade paperback, and you can check that book out. And and then yeah, I've got a ton of creator-owned books, a ton of you want to see some of my supernatural stuff, you can check out The Sixth Gun, you can check out Harrow County. There's just tons of those books out there. And I've even posted, if you go to my social media, I've posted a lot of my first issues, and in some cases entire first trades of some of my creator-owned stuff on there that you can read for free right now.
Wow. Yeah, definitely go check all that stuff out. And thank you everyone for watching, and definitely go check out Shadowman and everything Valiant's doing and what Cullen's doing, because they're all doing great, amazing stuff. So thank you again, Cullen, for coming on. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks everybody for hopping on.
All right. Bye guys. See ya. All right. Let's see.